Welcome to the official podcast of Vienna Shadows, a secret society uncovering Vienna's hidden mysteries. Lean back and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the debate. So today we're going to be digging into one of the most intellectually compelling artistic transformations we've seen in a while. We're talking about Amara Klang and this profound shift from her foundational genre, jazzpunk, to the new sound of drop the acid jazz.
And this is a pivot that really, it shakes the very foundations of the movement she created. Jazzpunk was never just music, right? It was a whole philosophical construct. It was defined by things like virtuosic vandalism and intellectual anarchy. It was designed to be confrontational.
Absolutely. It was meant to destroy placidity. So the central question we really have to grapple with here is whether this transition, this move toward music that's explicitly described as more melodic and, fit for party and hanging out with friends, whether that's a philosophical abandonment of the radical principles that define jazzpunk, or if it's something else, a necessary, maybe strategic evolution.
And I'm going to argue that it is a strategic evolution. I see this as a maturing of the resistance, one that recognizes that long-term survival requires adapting the fight to new sonic ground, moving past, the limits of just pure confrontation.
And I'm going to argue the opposite, that by embracing melodicism and comfort, Amara Klang risks compromising the very corrosive rage and the anti-establishment integrity that made jazzpunk a genuinely revolutionary force to begin with.
Position statements. Okay, so to understand what I see as a betrayal, we have to go back to the original commitment, the Jazzpunk Monster Busters manifesto. It demanded an aggressive refusal of all placid norms. We see this structurally in the blast swing rhythm, and crucially, in the chaos break. These elements weren't just flourishes, they were ideological necessities. They were there to violently articulate the reality that, quote, the geometry of the world is breaking down. The whole point of having high technical skill was to use it for sabotage.
I agree that the initial shock was essential. You had to break that gilded chain of musical tradition. But if we analyze the sound itself, you're right to highlight the harmonic choices. The original sound relied on these unstable, deeply unstable chords, the minor 7 flat 5, the 7 sharp 9, that were designed to sound sickly sweet, to signal that internal rot. A move to acid jazz, which is just inherently smoother, more grooving, it does risk smoothing over that necessary instability.
Exactly. And the lyrics seem to confirm this retreat, this move away from the alarm frau persona, the noise woman demanding everyone pay attention, is reflected right there in the source material. It speaks of playing practice parts on a stage of fading glamour. If the music is now just being used to drown the angry mountain crowd, then the revolutionary potential is gone. The artist is now administering a sedative, not a diagnosis.
See, I come at this from a different premise entirely. I don't see the evolution as a retreat. I see it as a recognition that the struggle against this kind of urban and cosmic dread requires a sustained internal strength. And even the original movement had that in it. It contained this antidote to the horror in moments of quiet human connection. You can hear it on tracks like Water of Dawn. The rage was external, sure, but the healing was always intimate.
But that healing was always framed by the overarching chaos.
Exactly. And Drop the Acid Jazz shifts the focus. It moves from external demolition to internal transformation, to resilience. The new lyrics reflect this perfectly. Yesterday dissolves away, and this dawn of transformation, I am changed. I choose to stay. Or finding my own way to sway to the music of today. This is self-assertion, not surrender. It's about breaking free from the old identity, breaking free from what they say, while holding on to that core mission of autonomy. No strings, my own design. It's just intellectual anarchy applied to personal liberation now, not just public critique.
That analysis of autonomy is compelling, but it fundamentally ignores the power of sound as a political weapon. The core power of jazzpunk was specifically in its structural dissonance. It was the sound of an alien parasite, the id, feeding on secrets. When we talk about a chord like the sharp 9, the so-called Jimi Hendrix chord that was all over the genre, we're talking about a harmony that has both major and minor intervals at the same time. It refuses to resolve. It forces the listener to sit in that instability.
That is an excellent technical articulation of the diagnosis. Yeah. But where I take issue is this assertion that instability is the only mode of resistance. If the music is now melodic, it doesn't mean the instability is gone. It just means the instability has been relocated.
Relocated where? Into a polite rhythm that's designed for dancing?
Into the lyrics, into the context. The melodic nature of acid jazz allows for infiltration rather than just outright rejection. Jazz punk was a confrontational public protest. Acid jazz is like a quiet, sustained distribution of forbidden knowledge. The rhythms are accessible, sure, but the intellectual payload, the awareness of that cosmic dread, it's still there, woven into the texture.
So you're arguing that they're trading the library book used to smash a window for quietly passing a note in a crowded room?
Precisely. We're talking about sustainable resistance. If you're constantly screaming in dissonance, you only attract the listeners who are already attuned to the void. But if you provide a groove, a rhythm that pulls people in, you can carry those complex, horrible concepts, like the fractal tentacles in my brain, much deeper into the mainstream consciousness. You achieve a broader political effect. The resistance shifts to the intimate act of connection. Coffee grows cold when I'm with you. That focus is crucial for longevity.
I acknowledge the tactical advantage of infiltration. I do, but I still maintain it sacrifices necessary discomfort. The original commitment of the movement was to reject settings of comfort. The artist was supposed to be performing in clandestine, smoky, Lerm-Keller noise cellars, these raw underground venues, not settings fit for party and hanging out. When you prioritize broad appeal, you are prioritizing comfort over the corrosive, revolutionary necessity of truth. The sound itself has to be antagonistic.
But you're assuming that the setting determines the philosophy. I'd argue that the artist is defining the space. The comfort you're talking about isn't a surrender to placidity. It's the building of a necessary community space. I mean, why must liberation only happen in darkness and noise? The acid jazz groove, that sense of ownership in the music, it's about making the body the ultimate site of the artist's autonomy, the core of the resistance.
Okay, but if the artist is defining the space, why is that space defined by fading glamour? Why is there a separation where the dancers are beyond the glass? This imagery suggests a proximity to the very bourgeois settings that Amara Klang initially declared total war against. I mean, the Jazzpunk revolution was about a total rejection of the formalities of the concert hall and the polite swing shuffle.
Because true aggressive liberation means defining your space and your identity on new terms. It means moving beyond the expectation that the artist has to stay static as the Lärmfrau, the noise woman. This transition is about embracing a new woman identity that is breaking free from what they say. It's an intellectual anarchy applied to the self. She's refusing to be defined even by her own old manifesto.
But doesn't that blur the lines so much that it just becomes assimilation, moving from the counterculture to something that's fit for party? It suggests an acceptance of the very societal structures, the leisure class, the commodification of art, that jazz punk was built to fracture. I mean, the political power of the sound is gone if it can soundtrack the dance floor of the people who are perpetuating the system.
I think you've misread the purpose of the shift. Even when played in these more accessible settings, the tension is explicitly acknowledged. The lyrics say, the music can't disguise the strain of poverty and mounting pain. The awareness of the struggle is carried into the new sonic space, and it acts as a disruptive element from within.
But that makes the confrontation passive. It becomes a backdrop, not the central action. The core identity of jazz punk was demanding the listener's full, anxious attention.
The philosophical core, though, the diagnosis of a city haunted by Lovecraftian horror and psychological warfare, that remains completely untouched. We still see references to ancient beings teaching truths we shouldn't know and walking through these ancient alleys after midnight. The lyrical scalpels are still sharp, so the philosophical continuity is there, even if the musical garment has changed. If the core terror is still the subject, the resistance hasn't faded, it has just changed tactics.
While the thematic consistency is undeniable, the choice of vessel is the entire point of contention. The sound of acid jazz inherently suggests a level of control and smoothness that just directly contradicts the necessary violent instability of a world where cosmic horror is manifest. The medium in this case is defining the message. So let's turn to the listener then. Jazzpunk demanded that the audience confront anxiety. The song structure's short, violent, averaging 2.5 minutes, that was a huge middle finger to those long, indulgent, sprawling songs. The brevity and intensity forced a sharp psychological confrontation. So does a move toward a genre defined by hanging out with friends dilute this necessary warfare and encourage indulgence rather than diagnosis? The sustained sway of acid jazz replaces the short, sharp shock.
That is an excellent point about the psychological demand. Jazzpunk provided the shock, yeah? It forced the listener to acknowledge the wound. But a movement can't survive on shock alone if the resistance is going to sustain itself. And the Catacombs narrative confirms that fighting for friends is crucial. It has to provide a shared space for release and regeneration.
But why must that regeneration be melodic? I would argue that jazzpunk was the gathering of strength. It was the communal scream of shared, necessary rage against the instability.
It was the communal expression of rage, I'll give you that, but it wasn't a sustainable gathering of strength. The new genre focuses on building community through shared action. Bodies moving, we own this block. This collective physical assertion is crucial for being able to face the screaming parasite the next day. You can't just engage in perpetual intellectual anarchy. You need a place to regroup.
But doesn't the communal dance risk turning the revolution into just therapy?
The danger is that the music becomes an escape valve for anxiety, letting the listener safely discharge their dread through rhythm, rather than forcing them to act on it.
I think you're underestimating the radical power of shared physical autonomy.
The melodic aspect provides the quiet grace, the shared rhythm that allows them to gather their strength. They're moving the revolution from the isolated, noisy Lärmkeller to the shared block. They're embracing the physical, communal act of dancing together as a political act of self-definition. And the lyrics reinforce this. I'll stand between the teeth and claws and everyone I love. Down in the catacombs, I'm fighting for my friends. This shift reflects a maturing movement that understands longevity requires a sustainable energy source beyond pure, transient fury.
Well, while I recognize the necessity of survival in community, I still maintain that the shift in sonic identity fundamentally alters the genre's political weight. The initial power of jazz punk was its uncompromised aggression. To trade the corrosive energy of the zur guitar, that scratchy, disruptive noise guitar, and the chaos of the chaos break, for melodicism is a strategic retreat from that anti-establishment fury. When the music makes the world feel stable enough for a party, it loses its power to articulate that the world is in fact crumbling.
But the core mission is autonomy and survival against cosmic dread, and that mission is still intact. The transition to a more melodic style is a necessary tactical shift. It reflects a maturing revolution that's focusing on internal, long-term resistance. The spirit of rebellion is still there, it's just proving that it can inhabit new sonic forms. By using the accessibility of acid jazz, Amara Klang finds a new, subtler way to shatter the expectations of the old world. The revolution is now danced, not just screamed, but it is no less potent.
Both perspectives really do illuminate the profound challenge facing any radical artistic movement. How do you maintain revolutionary integrity while navigating the necessity of change and longevity?
Exactly. Amara Klang's evolution forces us to question what the true measure of a radical philosophy is. Is it a refusal to ever change your methods? Or is it the ability to adapt your tools while retaining your core mandate?
We'll leave it to the listener to consider whether this evolution sacrifices the rigor of confrontation for broader reach, or if Amara Klang has mastered a new, more sustainable form of resistance.
This concludes today's episode. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Until next time, Vienna Shadows, signing off.